I know that one of the problems I have in furnishing my dollhouses is sometimes I want a piece of upholstered furniture, and it's hard to find one that's small enough to fit sometimes. Some of the rooms and some of the dollhouse kits are really small, so it's kind of hard to find furniture in the first place. And a lot of times it's either really expensive and I don't want to spend that much, or it's just the wrong color. So today and next week I'm going to show you how to reupholster some really inexpensive pieces of dollhouse furniture. I got this 4-piece set for under $20, and that's regular retail on them. I actually mail ordered mine from one of the online retailers when they had a sale, so I even got mine for even cheaper. This week we'll be working on the couch, and I'm going to put this into my Harrison, and it'll fit. The room is really small. The living room in there is really, really small, and this will fit, but I really don't like the color. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to change this ugly piece of furniture into something that is made just for the dollhouse I'm going to put it into. So stay tuned and see how we do this. Before we start actual work on our chair, let's talk about some of the things we're going to need, and I may have to add to the list as we go because each chair is a little different, each piece of furniture is a little different. We will need glue. I'm going to use regular tacky glue. I want something thinner than my normal fast grab tacky. That's just a little too thick to spread out in a thin enough layer. And speaking of spreading, I like to use my knitting needle to really get a thin coat of that glue. We need a piece of may need a piece of cardstock. So I've got a piece of white cardstock here. Sometimes we'll need that, sometimes we won't. We need scissors. I actually have fabric scissors and I have paper scissors. I never ever ever cut paper with my fabric scissors. It's really important. That will ruin your scissors. You need a piece of fabric, and it needs to be in scale. And this one will go, I picked this out a long time ago for the upholstered furniture in my Harrison. It goes with the color scheme in that room. If you haven't seen it, there is on one of my very first videos that I put up on YouTube on this channel was a photo tour of my Harrison. This piece of furniture will go in there. Of course, we need our furniture. Pencil, may or may not need it. And we need something to take this apart with because, yes, we are disassembling. This has to come all the way apart into pieces. Each piece will be covered, and then we'll glue it back together. So let me put all these things in a nice safe place, and we'll start taking this apart. All right, the first step in upholstering is, of course, taking it apart because we need to upholster each of these pieces and then reassemble this. So the first step in taking it apart is to really get a look at it and understand how this was put together. And make little, kind of think about, okay, the back lines up with this arm. The arms curve out. There's 2 cushions. We're going to need to, this one, they come around the arms. The backs are curved around the arms. So those are all things, kind of note those in your mind and keep those in mind. And now we're going to start taking it apart. As you can see, it's not really put together very well. It's one of the beauties of these cheap pieces. And try and figure out what piece would logically have probably gone on last, and that's the first piece to take off. Kind of wiggle. Get our knife in there. Now be very careful. You don't want to hurt yourself, and you don't want to break the wood on the furniture. Because if you break the wood, you're done. You can't really put it back together. And sometimes depending on how well these are glued together. Sometimes I find that using a blow dryer or a heat gun that's used in scrapbook embossing will help. And what you want is you want to get your fabric off if possible in one piece. There we go. There, we have an arm off. Try to keep the fabric that was on the piece with it. Now we need to take this arm off. That one came off easier. Kind of look to see, okay, where does that hinge? What piece of wood am I looking at? Where is it at? We've got a little piece split off, but that's okay. Work my knife in here. Get it to let go. It's okay if little pieces come apart. There, get that released. There, now the back is off. Now we've got cushions, and we've got a big solid piece, and then another solid piece. So let's see if we can pop the cushions off. See, this all comes off pretty easily. You do want to be careful. If you break little bits, you can glue some of them back together. You just don't want to do major damage. Okay, I think I'm going to have to hit this with the hairdryer, which I happen to have right here. Okay. From the hairdryer or the heat from a heat gun will melt the glue a little bit. See? Now it pops off a lot easier. There, that piece is off. And I'm finding that this piece is cut, so now we need to get in here. And I'm going to hit this with the hairdryer and warm it up, and then I'll be back. Alright, so I use the hairdryer, and there's been a little splitting down here, but nothing major. You just don't want to break any big pieces. And where did I leave my scissors? I don't want to use my good fabric scissors in here because there's glue in here. There, that piece is off. And we'll have to get this glue softened up and get these little bits of this wood off of there, but we'll do that in a little bit. Let's see, we need to get and this is really just a matter of getting in there, getting some heat into it, and getting these pieces pried apart. So I'm going to do just that. I'm going to use my hairdryer, and if the hairdryer doesn't work, I'll go get my heat gun and I'll get this glue softened and get these last pieces apart. Alright, so I've got it all taken apart. We had a few pieces of wood that shipped off, and I'll need to get those off. And we'll need to also get off most of this glue. It's really important because you don't want to have that in your way when you're trying to put this back together. That will prevent your furniture from going together nice and neat. So I'm going to get off all these clumps of glue, and I'm going to use a combination of scraping it and heating it up. Just be really careful. You don't want to hurt yourself. You don't want this to slip. I may resort to my paint scraper for some spots if I need to, but I'm only going to use that where I absolutely have to, because I don't want to gouge the wood and I don't want to gouge my fingers. So let me turn the camera off and I'll get these pieces all neatened up. When you do take the fabric off though, keep the fabric with the piece of furniture. And if you have any doubts as to which piece of this is what, label it. Like this is the bottom. So that I know now that's the bottom. And I know most of the pieces are pretty easy to tell, but if they're more square and not rounded at all, make sure you mark them so you can figure out what's what. So I'll finish cleaning these pieces up and I'll be back. Alright, the first piece we are going to cover will be our base. And I've got all the glue, or most of the glue off, as much as I could get off. And we are going to, I'm actually going to have this I cut a strip. I'm doing a little different than they had originally, because it's easier to make it lay flat and nice this way. So my piece is going to wrap around something like this. And since my couch will sit up against a wall, I'm going to make the pieces meet in the back. If you were going to have it sitting out where the back showed more, you might want to have it meet on a corner. So the first place I will glue, I'm actually going to just run a bead of glue right here. And lay this like this. And mainly right now I am anchoring this piece. I don't want to go all the way to the corner because I'll need to do some trimming. But this first glue spot is really just to anchor this fabric so as I'm working it doesn't slide all over the place. So when this is all the way dry, I'll be back and we'll finish this piece. Alright, this is all dry now. So now we're going to get the same side anchored on the other side of the board. And once this is all anchored, then we can go around. So don't want threads inside. Right in. Now if your fabric is directional, meaning you have a design that has to be right side up, make sure that you pay attention, because this is, I've marked this is the bottom side of the bottom. There. And these are nice and straight. I'm happy with that. So now we needed to anchor this side so that it would hold everything in place. So now we can actually start gluing all the way around. But don't do your corners yet. We aren't doing the corners until later, until this is dry. And check, especially since I have a check pattern, I need to make sure that my lines are running pretty straight, because that would look really bad if it was crooked. And like I said earlier, since mine will be against a wall, my seam in the back doesn't really matter, although I don't want it to overlap quite that much. Now, if this was going to be where it would be seen more, you would want to finish the edge, but mine is not going to be seen, so I'm not concerned about it. So after this part of the glue dries, I'll come back and we'll do the corners and move on to the next piece. Alright, my glue is set. So now it's time to deal with these corners, because we want them to lay flat. If we just glue them down, we're going to have a gob. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut into the corner, and I'm going to just cut off a little notch of fabric there. And then I'm actually going to put glue both under and I'll probably put more on top just to make sure this stays where I want it to. Yeah. A little more. Just don't get the glue around the edge so it shows on the right side. And a hint, if your back of your furniture isn't going to show, start playing with the back corners before you do the front corners that are going to be more visible later. That way if you make mistakes, you make them on the back side. This is fairly thin fabric, so it's laying down pretty well for me. Kind of funny, we used to have a real couch with almost the same plaid that would be in scale just about the same as this. Okay, so you can see this is going pretty quickly. Rather than bore you by keeping to do this, I think I will go ahead and turn the camera off and finish these two corners and these four corners. And I'll be back when I'm ready to do the next piece. Alright, so this is all set up now. And the glue is still a little tacky, but it's okay. Now our next piece, let's see, here's the front. This is our next piece. Remember this one had a little corner come out of it. And this only needs to be covered just this little bit here. But I will need to line up the fabric so that my checks line up. So let's get a look at this. This way. I want it to look like it belongs. So on a real piece of furniture, on a good piece of real furniture, these would line up. And I think that looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this right there. And I'm going to put some glue right here. I'm not going to glue all the way at the end. I'm just going to glue it like that. And then this needs to dry. So it will hold it in place, and then I can pick this up and manipulate it and get it around the ends. And I'll trim this back when the glue is dry also. So I'll be back when the glue is dry. Alright, so this is dry now, so I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to do some, I'll trim it after I get that done. So we'll need to pull this around, and I need to cut off the ends. I don't need this much fabric at the ends. So now I need to run, this can be out of my way, a bead of glue there. Making sure I keep that as straight as I can. Now, let's see, how was this? Our main goal here is just to get this around this corner without leaving too much visible on the front. Get that in first. I think they had glue in here too, it looks like, so that it because this really won't show. This part's going to be tucked back there. And that, I think, this area I'm actually going to need to clamp. So I'm using a plastic clothespin to clamp that. If you use a wooden clothespin, it'll stick, but if you use a plastic one, they don't stick as badly. And I think I want to let that dry before I try to do this end, so I'll be back in a little bit. Alright, so this is dry enough now to take the clothespin off. And basically I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm just going to, what we need is we need this area and this area to look good. What happens back here doesn't matter. This won't show. So first I want to cut off some of this. We don't need that much. And then again, put glue here and here. And clamp. I think at this point I can probably cut off some of this. There. Get rid of some of the bulk. Alright, after this is done and we get this onto here, then we can start working on seat cushions and those parts. So when this dries a little bit more, I'll be back. Alright, this glue is now dry enough to handle, and I'm going to trim off some of this fabric. I don't need all of this back here. And when this goes on, it'll go like this. Yeah, that's going to look good. So I think I'm going to go ahead and glue this so I know it's down and I know where it is and I don't lose it. Any of those things I'm prone to doing. And next we'll start on the seats. So this goes here. Make sure it's all lined up. Alright, now here are our seat cushions. Right, this is my back cushion. Where am I? Here's my seat cushions. Seat cushions fit like this and like this. So they'll go like that. So we need to cover them with some squares of fabric. And we'll need, again, to match our plaid so it comes up. Let's see this way. This can go this way. Yeah. This one can go like this. So let's see if we can make this match. Yeah, right like that is going to look good. Alright, so I've got it lined up. I know that it's, so let's get it lined. Get myself lined up and make sure it's going to fit. Is that right? Yeah. Alright, so something like this. So once again, we're going to pick this up, and this time I'm actually going to clip this like this so I don't lose this placement. And again, this will need to dry before I can cut it loose and do the next one. And I'm only going to do one seat cushion at a time. It's just, I prefer to work in small amounts of fabric at a time, have small amounts loose, you know, wet and gluing, so I don't lose track of where things go and what I'm doing. So I'll be back in a little bit when this part dries and we can go to the next step. Alright, so this should be dry enough that I can now trim and glue and all that good stuff. Now, if your seats didn't have decent padding, you could always put padding on here, or if you wanted to change the style a little bit, you could add more padding if you want to. Just don't put too much, because too much padding will make it out of scale. Okay, next I'm going to go here. I'm just going to kind of trim this up to get rid of some of our extra fabric. Got to be very careful because I do have a little piece of wood sticking out there for the edge, so I don't want to accidentally cut that off or break it or something. And basically we're just doing the same thing we did on that base as we're folding this up. Now remember, all the bottom stuff is going to be hidden. It won't show in the final product. But we don't want too much bulk down there either, because if there's too much bulk, this won't sit the right way. It'll be bulky, it'll be bumpy. Oops. Don't want to get any glue on the front if I can avoid it. As you can see, this is not really a difficult project. It's just kind of time consuming, and you have to kind of think through where things go and how they fit together in the final project. You know, how does the chair go back together? So let's see about getting this kind of pulled around this area like this. Put some glue in here. Get glue in here. And you want to be careful that this is all on straight. Hopefully I'm not making this go crooked too much. So let's see how this looks. Oops, I need to put that back. There. Yeah, that's going to work. So let's put some glue here. And let's get this all glued back down before our fabric gets away from us. Making sure we line this all up again. And now we need to get this one lined up. So again, I want to make sure my fabric is going the right way. And it's easier to get your fabric on straighter when you're not trying to do this for a camera, because you can turn it and manipulate it around to where you can see better. I'm actually having to work a little bit where it's hard for me to see what I'm doing sometimes. Get that just a little bit further back. So that lines up. There, now it lines up with that one. Let's make sure it lines up with the bottom. Now I'm trying to make sure I'm lined up here and here. So these stripes come apart. So now this needs to set up enough that it won't be anchored, and then we can go on to the next step, and I think I'm going to set my glue right there to kind of hold everything in place. So when this dries, I'll be back. Alright, this is dry now, so you can go ahead and trim the fabric a little. And yeah, we waste fabric on this project. It's okay. We're not using much anyway, total. So. So yeah, that's going to line up. I hope this is going to line up anyway. I guess we'll find out soon. Let's see, I guess I should probably trim this back because I don't need this much now. The less design on your fabric, probably the less fabric waste you'll have. And if you have some kind of a design that's got to be centered, like some floral designs on furniture, you'll probably waste more fabric than I am. It's going to be fine. Pull this side over. Got glue on the front. Let's see if I can cut this back so I don't have quite so much bulk over there. Okay, I'm going to cut this. And again, you don't have to worry about what this stuff looks like as long as the top looks good and it's not making big lumps. Don't worry too much about it. The edges that show are the ones you need to worry about. There. That looks pretty good. Let's go ahead and get glue down on our seat. And under. And set our glue on top. Alright, this part needs to dry, and when that's dry, we'll start on the sides and the back. Alright, now the couch is pretty much, this is dry, and we're ready to move on to our arms. So I'm holding this arm in place. Remember, it curves out, so we can tell which one goes where, and it has an angle in the back. So I look at this carefully, and this edge, this front edge, lines up pretty well with that light blue stripe there. So I need to get my fabric ready. Let's see, this will work here. And now it's lined up, it's going the right direction. So I'm going to find, and I want to have plenty to fold over on both ends because it's going to fold over. And we're going to line it up like that. So I'm actually just going to coat this side of the piece with glue, and I'll be using my knitting needle to spread it out. We want to make sure that we coat this pretty well, but really thin, a really thin coat so it has less of a chance to ooze out. And make sure there's glue down in there, because we want our fabric to adhere to that. There. Got it lined up. push the needle down there and really seat the fabric into that crease. Let's see how it looks this way. And it looks pretty well. It's lined up pretty well that way too. So now we'll do the same thing. I'm just getting rid of little pieces of fabric I'm picking up all over my table. And we're going to coat this side too. And I found the best way to do this is to actually just glue it on, and then we'll fold the front and back around, carefully trimming. But get your glue all the way to the edges of the wood so that you don't cut too far. Okay, now this will need to dry, and when it's dry, I'll come back and we'll do the next step. Alright, the next step, we need to glue the fabric very carefully around to the face of this arm on each end. So to do that, just spread it so it's a nice even layer of glue. I think you can see that. And try and keep your lines. It's going to be really hard to keep the lines straight. Just try not to have them too out of whack. And then this needs to dry before we trim. Once this is dry, then we can trim it. Come back so I can fold this back a bit. Okay, so when that's dry, we'll come back and trim, and then we can go on to the next step. Alright, so the glue is pretty much dry now, so now we need to very carefully cut this off on the inside first. On the flat side, I'm cutting the bottom off, because this will be hidden. I like to cut back slowly and not cut it all at once, because I want to make sure I'm not going to leave a gap. And if this doesn't come out right, there's a couple of things you can do to fix it. If you're not happy with, I'm not sure I'm going to be happy with how this looks as far as this not being straight, I can always cut a piece of cardstock and cover it with my fabric and glue over this. If you're not happy with, like if you cut back too far, you can put a piece of embroidery floss on to look like decorative cording on real furniture. So there's always ways to fix things, but if you're not happy with how it looks. And on mine, the back doesn't matter too much because, like I said, it's going to be against the wall. And then I like to take glue it. Put a line of glue on the bottom. Fold that over, and let that glue set, and then we'll trim this extra off and do the same thing on the other arm. Now we need to do the back. Now on mine, the back tips, so I need to make sure I'm covering the outside back, not the inside back. So this is the outside back. So let's get a piece of fabric. I've got lots of scraps here that are too small. And I'm not going to worry too much about having it match plaid because it's not going to show. If yours is going to show on the back, then you'll want to make sure that your plaid matches the back. And once again, we are just going to pretty much just cover it like we did the rest of the places. I think this time I'm actually going to pull my corners in first and then pull the sides in and see if that works a little easier for me. And after this dries, I can trim and fold these edges over. So let's let those corners glue, and then I'll be back. Okay, I think this is not completely dry, but it's dry enough I can kind of glue on here. So we are going to pull this bottom up. I think it's going to lay pretty flat that way. If your fabric is bulky, you might have to do some more trimming than I am here. This is going to all be covered up by the back cushions on the couch, so it really won't show at all. And then our next step will be to glue the couch together, and then we can do our back cushions after that. Over that. I just need to pull it over. Hey, it's sticking. I've got so much glue laying around here, it's sticking without gluing it. And keeping in mind that if the back of your couch will be showing, you will need to make sure that this is the side that needs to look good. Mine, I'm just going to have it against a wall. Alright, now when this dries, we can assemble the couch, and then we've only got the 2 seat cushions to cover later. Alright, so now this is dry. My arms are both dry. Whoops, I haven't trimmed this one yet, have I? I do need to trim this. Alright, so now it's time to put this together, and then we can do the seat cushions when this is dry. So, first thing I'm going to do is put some glue. And I like to put all 3 pieces, the arms and the back, on all at once, because I find it really helps to get everything seated correctly. And I like to put the back seat cushions on last after this is all put together. I think because it's easier to get everything lined up so my design all lines up. I'm just putting some glue here. Alright, curve out, angled part to the back. Get that lined up. Same with this side. And you might need to do a little pushing to get it to seat where you want it, and wipe off any glue right away that oozes out, because you don't want glue on your fabric. This fabric is actually pretty forgiving when it comes to glue. Okay, I'll put some glue right there too. That's what I forgot. It's starting to look like a couch again. Put this together and hold it really tight for a few minutes. And now this needs to dry completely before we start messing with those back cushions. So I'm going to let this dry and then I'll be back. Alright, so now that this is securely glued and everything's dry, we need to cover the last two pieces, which are the back cushions. You see, they're going to cover up this part, so we don't have to worry about how that looks. This is a relatively simple piece of furniture. You can do this with, like I said, any of these cheap pieces of furniture will work the same way. Alright, so this needs to go this way. We are going to, let's see, I can cut this. This piece can be cut in half and hopefully it will line up. Let's see, what are the chances I've got it? Let's go this way. Let's see if I can make this line up. Yeah, that lines up. Hey, I'm getting pretty good at this. Alright, so I have my design lining up. So once again, we're doing the same thing. We just repeat the same process on each piece. I put some glue there, make this straight, and anchor. Then when that's dry, I'm just going to fold it around just like I did on all the others, and I'll go ahead and get these two pieces covered, just the same as we did with the seat piece and everything else. When I'm done, I'll come back, we'll glue the couch together, these onto it, and we'll be done. And I'll show you some other things you can do to trim it up or age it or whatever. Alright, I've got both of these cushions covered. So now it's just a matter, and I've checked them out, it's now just a matter of really coating the crap out of this. You want to get plenty of glue because you want this to stay. Unless, of course, you want to recover it again. But remember, you can always take this apart and put on different fabric later. Alright, let's push this into the glue. We do want it to stay together while we're displaying it. And we've got it. So, we have a completely recovered couch. That looks a lot different than the original fabric, doesn't it? You can always come through with like some embroidery floss or some kind of other thread about like that, and an edge if you want to make it look like cording. You could take a brown wash and kind of age this if it's supposed to look like an old couch that's kind of banged up, but for what I'm going to do, I like it just this way. So I hope you enjoyed this project. Like always, if you do one of my projects, let me know. Feel free to join us on Facebook and post a picture on the wall there of your project. I'd love to see what you're doing. And next week, I'm going to do something entirely different with this little chair. So I'll see you then. Bye.